FAIRtax is coming, don't stand in the way. FAIRtax is coming across the USA. FAIRtax is coming, clean up this mess. We got to get rid of the IRS. Hey, hey! Hey, hey!
Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
And we are
The
FAIRtax
FAIRtax
Guys. Again, reminding you that the income tax is a corrupt, nasty organization, the IRS is, and the income tax is it's a drain on the economy and all kinds of bad things, and we need to get rid of it.
Yep.
Sorry, I just had to get that off my chest to start with.
Yeah, we just kind of, it's kind of like going to a AAA meeting. No, that's a AA.
Yeah, AAA is the automotive thing. If they come bring you gas or when you're locked out of your car, they'll come let you in.
Yeah, the IRS is a universally hated organization in
The
this
IRS
country.
will come take your car from you.
Well, that's true, yeah. And anything else they can get a hold of.
Okay,
So-
so a little housekeeping to start with. Always invite people to get in touch with us through our email address, thefairtaxguys@gmail.com, or to leave us a comment or a question on our Facebook page. Just go to Facebook, look up The FAIRtax Guys, and you'll find us.
Yep. We recently recorded a Facebook Live event, so that will be on our Facebook page along with the FAIRtax official Facebook page. If you weren't able to tune in live, you can go watch us, after the fact. Seemed to go pretty good, don't you think, Bob?
Yeah, those are fun to do. Sometimes
they are.
we have some
They are.
technical glitches, but we deal with them, and it all
Yep.
works out in the end.
Time goes fast.
Plus, some really good people usually come in with some really good questions and comments. And, of course, we got to thank Randy Fisher, our colleague here that's online with us while we're on the air.
Right.
He's in the next room answering all the comments that come in over Facebook Live, so we do
'cause
appreciate
he
him
really
as well.
has a huge, deeply knowledge, a great knowledge base, you might say, about taxation in general and the fair tax. Okay. So we depend on him for some of the questions that Bob and I cannot answer.
Yeah, and somebody else we need to acknowledge, someone has put in over a decade of service here in Florida where we live. Mark Gupton has just decided to step back and announced his resignation from the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association, again, after over a decade of service. You've actually talked to him a lot more than I have, but this is a guy whose heart and soul is in the fair tax, and we certainly want to express our thanks and appreciation to Mark for all that he's done over the past decade on behalf of getting the fair tax passed.
Yeah, Mark has been a tireless worker. He is the managing director of the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. That may not mean much to those of you that live outside of Florida, but to us, it's very important. And managing director means that he's president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. He does the whole thing. And not only that, only as a good manager, but he's extremely knowledgeable about the fair tax. If we run into a question that we can't handle, either Bob and I or my wife and I, then I always send it off to Mark and Dr. Walby and Steve Hayes. And between the three of them, they will answer the question.
Well, I know that Mark was really important to us here in Florida. This program extends well beyond Florida, but we did want to acknowledge our colleague and wish him the best in the future.
Yep.
You came up with let's shift gears here and get into the meat of what we did. You came up, you were always coming up with neatest little goodies that I don't know where you find these things, but go ahead and share your gem of wisdom that you have brought for you today.
Got a couple of headlines here, and all I'm going to read is the headlines. This one was from CNS News, May 11th. A quote from Speaker Ryan: "Republicans agree on tax reform, confident it will pass this year." And then the
flip side of that coin looks like what?
in another one, we got, this is from Politico on May 17th. Wall Street gives up on 2017 tax overhaul. So
somebody's not telling the truth.
So, I mean, that kind of sums up what's going on in Washington in terms of tax reform. Nobody really knows. We can summarize it. You know, Bob and I have talked about this before. what I've heard, the Ryan tax plan, we've gone into detail about the Ryan tax plan. And one of the big problems with Ryan's plan is even though he insists he's trying to simplify the tax code, he's adding a brand new tax that nobody's ever seen before, which he calls the border adjustability tax, which violates the agreements with the World Trade Organization.
That's not going to fly with the World Trade Organization as it's currently written.
Yeah, they're not going to go with that. So, well, I've heard, through some of our sources, Randy being one of them, is that that's running into a lot of problems in the Senate, and it's probably not going to pass. Which is good, because we don't need a new tax, all right? We've got enough problems with the current tax. We need let me rephrase that. We don't need an additional new tax. We need a whole complete reversal of what we're doing. Yeah, we need to get rid of the income tax in every way, shape, and form and replace it with a consumption tax. That's the only thing that makes sense.
Yeah, but you mentioned something here that just the political reality of the time we live in.
Yeah.
You can have Ryan's got a proposal, President Trump has got a proposal,
yeah.
And for every proposal there is another political constituency out there that says this is dead on arrival. We're not going to do anything with it.
That's right.
And we have heard that both the Trump plan and the Ryan plan have been pronounced dead on arrival in various different places.
Yes, by various facets of the political spectrum.
Something's going to happen, but the silver lining in that cloud is it could very well be that the fair tax is the only thing left standing at the end of the day when they finally get through this entire debate.
Yeah, well, we know that. I mean, we know because we study this, like every day. The income tax is going to fail. There's no question about it. The only question is Congress going to recognize this fact before it becomes a crisis? Or are they going to wait for a severe crisis to try to remedy this situation? Let's be a little proactive, folks. But there's another aspect of this income tax and income tax reform, something that I didn't realize until, it was explained to me. The very large corporations, the mega corporations, they like the current system because they can afford lobbyists.
So they can buy the favorable tax treatment that the other guys don't get.
That's right. But 70% of the jobs in this country are created by small businesses. So Bob and I are going to concentrate on small businesses today, and we're going to review our what we call sizzle points, and I'm not going to explain that again. But anyways, these particular points about how the fair tax relates to business. And we're pretty sure that all the small business people across the country are fair tax fans, even if they've never heard of the fair tax. Mm-hmm. We're pretty sure of that.
Yeah, because really, doesn't matter on the size of your business. The most important thing to a business that is well run is the bottom line, to make sure that you're profitable. Because if you're not profitable, you're not going to stay in business very long. If you're not in business very long, then the people who own it, the people who work for it, everyone associated with that business doesn't have a job anymore. So it is always good for businesses to be profitable. And of course, one of the huge components affecting the bottom line is your costs.
Yeah.
What does it cost you to stay in business? What does it cost you to buy the materials that you need to make your product? What does it cost you to pay the people to do that? And of course, another big thing that a lot of folks don't think of is the compliance cost that the income tax system imposes on small business. It is incredible.
Yeah, the compliance costs, I've seen a figure where the compliance costs for a small business are very often 7 times larger than the actual tax itself.
A compliance cost, this is money you have to spend to hire a tax attorney, money you spend on accountants, the value of your time that you spend keeping track of all the things that the IRS needs you to do.
Software?
Yeah, software does automate some of it for sure, but still it takes you time when you're paying your employees to figure out how much the withholding should be and submitting that into the IRS. There's just a lot of compliance costs in both the direct and indirect costs that go away with the fair tax. If you're at a small business and you are not in the retail sector, guess what? Your taxes go away completely.
Yeah,
because the fair tax is a retail level tax only. If you're not in the retail business, your tax goes away because there's no tax to deal with.
Yeah, and collecting the sales tax by the retailers is not a big deal. I mean, it's done. It's another line of code in the computer program. It's not a big deal. When we interviewed Bob Matthews, he has to do a sales tax for the state of Florida. He said it takes him 15 minutes. They get the gross number of sales. They have a percentage. They fill out the form. Boom, it's done. That's it.
Yeah, because that's something that could be almost 100% automated.
Yeah.
When your point of sale system calculates the tax on every applicable sale. And again, not all sales are subject to the fair tax. If you buy used goods, no fair tax on that. Fair tax only applies to new goods and services. And it costs next to nothing to comply with it, because all you got to do is your computer figures out how much it is, keeps track of how much you've collected, and then at the end of the month, or however so often you do it, you remit that amount to the state revenue agency. The states are going to collect the fair tax, not the federal government.
Right.
So there will be no need for anything that even remotely resembles the IRS if we can get rid of the income tax and replace it with a fair tax.
Now, Bob just stated how simple the reporting of a sales tax is by the retail industry. Compare that to what we have now with over 70,000 pages of code. So we already talked to the compliance costs for a business. Part of the compliance costs are making sure that they're staying legal, that they're paying everything they're legally required. Also, another component is going through the tax code and making sure they're taking advantage of all the legal loopholes, all right? Because if they can legally avoid taxes or reduce their tax
Tax
their tax burden, thank
There you go.
then they're, it's better for their business. It's
That's
better
the
for their
difference
customers.
between tax avoidance and tax evasion.
That's right. Tax avoidance is good. And if you're legally avoiding taxes by scouring the law, but these small corporations, these small businesses, who has time to go through all 70,000 pages of them?
And most of the time they can't afford a high-end attorney that does nothing but, or a high-end tax accountant that does nothing but try to keep up with the tax law. So it's just really impossible for the mom and pop business to take full advantage of what's available out there in the tax code for them. But really, most of the tax code was written by the big guys.
Yeah.
The mom and pop guys
unfortunately.
are the ones that get the short end of the stick when they come to writing a tax code, because they can't fork over the 6- and 7-figure campaign contributions that the big lobbyists and big corporations can.
Well, what's another thing that can help these small businesses? And we're concentrating on small businesses because they create the vast majority of jobs in this country.
Again, I go back to the interview we did with Bob Matthews a while back. He's a small business. He deals with parachutes.
Yeah.
And he competes in the world market making these parachutes. And his competitors are in Brazil. His competitors are in Europe. His competitors are all over the globe. And a lot of his competitors live under a VAT tax, which when a product is sent out for export, the government gives that back.
Yeah.
So the tax component in the cost of producing that product, whatever it might be, is not included in it when it hits the world market. For them, it is for the American products. So the American tax system puts American corporations at a tremendous disadvantage in the global market, which is becoming more global every day.
Yeah, and if you extrapolate that example to all the thousands and thousands of small companies that ship overseas, they're at a severe disadvantage. I mean, that is a severe disadvantage for the companies in our country shipping overseas with those embedded costs that they cannot get rid of, and they're there because of the complexity of the income tax. And of course the fair tax does away with that. Whereas the competing companies in other countries, their VAT tax is removed by their parent company or country.
Yeah, they get that reimbursed back to them, so they can sell on the global market at a lower price. And Bob says he gets undercut all the time by people that he just literally can't compete with because of the tax code.
And that happens every day, day in, day out, with all of these small companies here in the U.S. So we are at a disadvantage. Our companies are at a disadvantage. We need to do something for these folks, all right? We need to make it easier for these folks to do business. We need to make them more competitive across the globe, because even a small company can be competitive across the globe, if they got the right product that's in demand.
Okay, if you'd like to see jobs come back to this country, because that's what's happening when all of these companies, big, large, small, medium-sized, whatever, a lot of them are going overseas. Corporate inversion, you hear that called all the time. when an American company goes overseas, locates its headquarters in another country because it's a more favorable tax treatment, and a lot of jobs, a lot of stuff goes with it. And you see the politicians wringing their hands and talking about, oh, what horrible thing that is. We need to punish these guys for doing that. Yeah. No, you need to provide an economic incentive for them not to. And the fair tax does that in spades, again, because it removes, if you're not in the retail business, your federal tax load goes to zero. None.
Yeah. You know, it really rankles me when I hear somebody in Congress talking about how horrible these companies are if they're opening up an office overseas or moving their headquarters overseas. Why are they doing that? They're trying to survive, and the thing that's interfering with their survival is our tax code, which the congressman had a hand in creating. So here is this congressman railing against this company, how horrible this company is for sending their manufacturing overseas, where it is the congressman who's probably been there 20 or 30 years and has voted in favor of the very tax code that is causing this to happen. So it's either disingenuous on their part or they're completely oblivious to what the heck they're doing. Either way, they don't need to be there any longer. But that's another story.
Oh, yes, it is. That's it. If you want to stop corporate inversions, don't rail against them and threaten them legislatively. Businesses are just like human beings. They are run by people. They respond to the same thing. And if you can save, a good bit by shopping across town, you will. And the idea is not to berate someone for going across town. It's to make the store that's closer to your house more competitive, give them an economic incentive to do it, because they're going to do what makes economic sense to their bottom line, period. Regardless of what the politicians rail against them, of course, if they pass laws, they have to deal with that, which again raises their prices to everybody and makes American products less competitive. It's a vicious circle on that. And again, the fair tax gets rid of the whole thing because it gets rid of the entire income tax system. Both personal income taxes and corporate income taxes gone under the fair tax. And those tax costs and tax compliance costs get rolled down to the consumer anyway. So just let the consumer pay the tax when he buys the product. End of story, end of problem, and a lot of stuff good happens.
Now, let's relate that to, I've got a little something in my throat here, but...
Well, I got it too. You can have it back.
Let's relate that to the current proposals by the President and Speaker Ryan.
Okay.
What they are proposing by simplifying the tax code, reducing the brackets from 7 to 3, reducing the rates, and they want to reduce the corporate tax rate, and they want to reduce the, I can't remember what you call it, the repatriation tax, U.S. money that's held overseas. If it comes back now, is subject to a huge tax. Mm-hmm. They want to reduce that. All that stuff will help. There's no question that will help. But how long will it last? See, that's another problem with the current system. There's no stability. Bob, we just looked that up, on the recent Facebook Live page. Congress.gov.
Yeah, we've been watching Congress.gov here at FairTax Power Radio, keeping track of how many proposals, changes to the Internal Revenue Code of 1986 have been introduced into Congress. We looked at it last night on our Facebook Live event, and it was just shy of 600.
600 proposals.
Of course, not all of those are going to pass, but 600 proposals so far to change the Internal Revenue Service Code. So how do you plan for the future when you don't know what the future is going to look like from a tax standpoint?
So, in small businesses, again, they don't have the resources to thoroughly scour the tax code and find all the things that would be an advantage to them. They just can't do it. So they're at a distinct disadvantage. And they may be paying more than they're legally required to, but that's the way it goes. So, again, for people in small business, you need to pay attention to this fair tax. This is going to be a huge benefit to you. And even though the large corporations are much larger, there's more of you than there is of them, all right? Yeah. Make your voices heard.
Okay, and of course, it's not a level playing field. As you mentioned earlier, the big corporations have the lobbyists, they have the accountants, they have the tax attorneys, they have the money to buy favorable tax treatment, but the mom and pop businesses don't. And if you like a level playing field, who doesn't like a level playing field, at least from a philosophical perspective? And if you do that, if you like a level playing field between small and big business, you might be a fair tax fan. In fact,
That's
you
right.
are a fair tax fan, and you don't know it.
Yep. Because only the fair tax is going to level out that playing field.
And I think we need to hit on this. Business-to-business purchases not taxed at all.
That's an
under the
important
FAIRtax.
concept.
That is a big one.
Yep. Under the FAIRtax, the final consumer of a product or service will pay the FAIRtax. I mean, it's kind of that way now, but under the FAIRtax, only the people, when they go to the store and buy something, a new coffee maker, a new automobile, whatever it is, a new pair of jeans.
Can I have a Learjet?
Or a service, or you pay for the plumbing service or whatever. It's the final consumer that's going to pay it. All right. So that means that when you're in business, and let's say you have a plumbing business and you need a new pickup truck because the old one's getting kind of rickety. All right. When you purchase that pickup truck or a new computer or whatever the piece of equipment is, there will be no FAIRtax assessed on that. Business-to-business purchases will not be subject to the FAIRtax because that only starts rolling in those embedded costs again. And there's going to be some people that say, "Oh, well, that's not fair. The corporations have to pay their fair share." That is
they
phony.
Don't. They pass their fair share on to us.
Yeah, it's a cost to tax, just like the pickup truck or their computer. The taxes are a cost of doing business. They get rolled into the price of their product and service. And you and I, the American consumer, we're the ones that end up paying it. So don't fall prey to this phony argument that the corporations need to pay their fair share. Their fair share becomes our unfair share, okay? So forget that argument. It just doesn't make sense. Under the FAIRtax, it will be perfectly legal and absolutely necessary. Business-to-business purchases will not be subject to the FAIRtax. The final consumer is the one who pays the FAIRtax, the person at the cash register or the person who's paying for that service they just received. We're essentially doing that now anyways, but it's a little indirect and it's and subject to demagoguing by people in Congress and others.
Yeah, one of the things you hear is that the FAIRtax is going to add 23% to the cost of everything you buy. Not true, because it removes the tax component that's being passed on to you. Prices are probably going to rise somewhat at the retail level, but you're going to have your entire paycheck, no withholding. You're going to be getting the prebate every month, which is a rebate of the tax that you pay at the cash register that you don't owe. Because no individual will owe any FAIRtax until their spending rises above the poverty level. And obviously, you can't keep track of how much everybody spends. So just collect it from everybody from $1 and give back what they don't owe in the form of the prebate. Yep. So I love the idea of getting a tax refund every month, guaranteed, instead of once a year, maybe.
So now, when you talk about, the stability of the FAIRtax, the way it drives down the cost of doing business, because it's so much easier. The fact that business-to-business purchases are not taxed under the FAIRtax, you're going to have more money to expand your business. I mean, it's just going to be that simple. You're not going to be spending so much on complying with the tax code. You're not going to be worried about having to pay a corporate tax, and there's going to be stability. You're going to be able to plan for the future. So when that all adds up into expanding businesses, which means more jobs.
Okay. Well, if you own a small business or you work for a small business, you are going to want the FAIRtax, no doubt about it.
Absolutely.
Again, if you own a small business, let me encourage you to get in touch with the FAIRtax volunteers in your area, because we've got organizations in just about every state. And every last one of them will be happy to come out to you, explain the FAIRtax on a personal one-to-one level to you, and just learn more about it. As we say, once you understand it, you'll demand it.
Yeah.
Because it's that good. And
you can do your own research online. Go to fairtax.org.
Yep, right there.
There's just tons of information there. And if you feel it's important enough and you want to get involved, you go to bigsolution.org. bigsolutionsingular.org. And that's where you can connect, contribute, support, and help us build our database. But we're focusing this episode on small businesses. So it's really important for you. If you run a small business, you need to get involved in the FAIRtax, because it's going to make your life so much easier, and it's going to help you expand your business. It's going to help you to be more profitable. And it's going to help you and when you expand your business, you create more jobs. That's what we want in this country.
That's what it's all about, because we've mentioned this before, that the current tax code was written by lobbyists for lobbyists, by and large, or by billionaires for billionaires, et cetera, because most of the folks that are living in Congress that have been there for 2,700 years, embedded in there, they do what's best for them. And what's best for them is selling tax favors that they can't do under the fair tax. Because when you get the fair tax passed, you're not going to be able to put all these exemptions in there. All you can do is change the rate.
That's
if
right.
you change the rate, every consumer in the country is going to have their eye on you. It is amazing, Ron, how much tax code changes happen that the people that are affected by it really have no clue what's going on.
No, how many people listening knew that there was around 600 proposed changes to the tax code just since the beginning of January?
Yeah, but that's proposals. Now, let's talk about ones that actually get passed. Over the past decade, there has been an average of more than one change per day over 10 years to the tax code.
Yeah.
And I guarantee you there's not anybody on the street that can name a dozen of them.
No, that's true. That's true. I mean...
Okay.
It's crazy the way the lobbyists play the people in Congress for these benefits, to benefit their corporation or whatever. Yeah, they're playing one against the other, and to the detriment of all of us.
Indeed. So we need to get rid of this corrupt income tax system that is difficult to deal with, impossible to understand, discriminates against one group and helps another. It's not a level playing field. We just need to get rid of it and understand that the fair tax is the only tax reform proposal that is going to get rid of the income tax. And what's really cool is the income tax was unconstitutional before they passed the 16th Amendment. The Supreme Court said so. Yep. The fair tax is contingent upon repealing that thing. Yeah. Of course, an act of Congress cannot change the Constitution, but there's a provision there in the fair tax that says if the 16th Amendment is not repealed in the normal 7-year window that it takes to change the Constitution, then the fair tax goes away, because we are not going to have a consumption tax and an income tax. If you were a politician, as a taxpayer, that's a horrible idea.
That would be a terrible idea, because you know what, folks? We've got Congress's number. They cannot control themselves. If they had a consumption tax and and an income tax, it would not be good. Now they did that in Europe. I remember that lady years ago when I first got involved, and she said, don't let them do what they did to us. They promised if we put the sales tax, which is actually the VAT tax, that they could reduce the income tax. They didn't. They added the VAT tax. Their income taxes stayed the same or gone worse, and so they're taxed up the wazoo over there. And she was keenly aware of that. So forget that. No. You're not going to have a combination of those. That's a terrible idea. Get rid of the income tax altogether. Repeal the 16th Amendment. Get rid of the IRS. Put in the fair tax. That's the best way to tax, to collect taxes for the federal government for our country.
Well, hopefully if all these other tax reform plans are dead on arrival in various assorted places that they say they are, the fair tax will be left standing. Because we do understand that there is, it's largely, the most support for the fair tax is coming from the Republican side of the aisle now, but there are Democrats that are warming up to the idea of a consumption tax.
That's right.
And when you talk about one that is as progressive in its application as the fair tax is, everyone pays their fair share. There's mathematically no way to get around it. If you spend more, you pay more because it's included in the price of everything you buy. There is a lot to like about the fair tax for everybody on both sides of the aisle.
Now, I just have to mention that one of the reasons that Democrats are warming up to it, I mean, it's so polarized in Washington. It's not good. But Steve and Peggy, board members of the AFFT, have been going up there once a month for almost 2 years, and they have made great progress on both sides of the aisle in informing people about the fair tax, and that's why we're achieving some success. But we need your input, small business people. We need you to contact your congressman and your 2 senators, and you need to study this and become knowledgeable about this and get involved.
So, as is so often the case, time flies when we're having fun. We are out of time for this episode of FairTax Power Radio. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Bob Paxton.
And I'm Ron Malero.
Reminding you again that the fair tax is America's big solution, and once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
Fair tax is coming. Don't stand in the